It is the Brian Bulaga Homer Hour, the Super Bowl Brian Bulaga Homer Hour. And I'm still looking for the person who predicted Philly to just annihilate them. As I like to say, the Titanic did better. All right, Brian, you're watching it. I know you're shocked.
Yeah, I did not expect that outcome. I mean, and you know, for as many times the Chiefs have got themselves out of issues like that throughout the season, they had no answers. And look no further than what happened up front. And Brady kept referring to it throughout the game. Like he kept going back to it, like how they beat the Chiefs in their Super Bowl matchup when they played them when he was on the Bucks. They got after Patrick Mahomes in with the pass rush, and that's exactly what the Eagles did. They frustrated him. I mean, I felt like they sacked him or hit him or rushed him almost every other play, and that they just dominated Kansas City up front. I mean, you had Thuney, who is an All-Pro guard, playing tackle. Like, and the problem with that is that only works for so long. And eventually that gets exposed. And it got exposed in the biggest moment on the biggest stage, and that's the Super Bowl. And then, the problems that Kansas City's had out at right tackle. I mean, it's well known, the false starts, the holdings, that got exposed. And then, you move Thuney out the left tackle, then the left guard, Caliendo, that finally kind of gets exposed. So things just kind of came to a head for Kansas City. They could never get any momentum. Mahomes was always on the back foot, moving around, scrambling, and the defense of Philly just completely, just whitewashed Kansas City, and it was an impressive defensive display by Philadelphia.
Well, my question is, and granted, I've been told I'm not a good listener, but I don't remember anything prior to the game, people going like, Phil is just going to destroy their offensive line. They aren't even going to need to blitz. I mean, the premise of the Philly defense was talked about, but I don't remember anything because watching it, you would have thought, well, everybody must have seen this because clearly the defensive coordinator did. They never blitzed once. Can you ever remember playing a game in which the defense you played never blitzed once in the entire game?
No, I don't. I mean, and I guess, they knew something that everyone didn't. And they must have looked at their matchups up front, and they must have just absolutely loved them. And the thing, you look at the way Philly is set up and how dominant they are on the inside, the interior, and immediately when you move Thuney out of that interior, they have Kansas City has a good interior with those three guys, Humphreys, the right guard, he's slipping my mind right now. The kid from Tennessee, he's been there for a minute. And then Thuney, those original three that were in there are a great interior, and they hold a solid pocket for Mahomes when they're together. But you remove Thuney from that and put him at left tackle, and all of a sudden now you have a weakened interior three, and that means Humphreys has to help out predominantly on one side, and you can really attack one side of this offensive line. And Philly saw that. Vic Fangio is a phenomenal defensive coordinator. I've gone up against him a bunch when he was in San Francisco, when he was in Chicago. He's very good.
No, he never played against him when he never blitzed.
Oh,
that's what he say he does.
He pressured. He pressured plenty.
Okay.
He pressured when he had that great defense in San Francisco. I mean, he did it. A bunch. He'd have Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman mug up. One would pressure, one wouldn't. One would drop. I mean, he did it all the time. So, but he must have saw something in this matchup that he just felt, I can rush with four. We're going to get home. We're going to create pressure. And as the game went on, that's exactly what it showed. And they didn't need to do anything else. And from the outset of this game, and what Vic Fangio's defenses are.
Let me interject and ask you one other question. Is it possible that he did this because it gets Mahomes at his worst? I don't know if he took that from another Super Bowl. So you're not only not blitzing, but you're also playing in the back, and Mahomes struggles in this or whatever. I don't know. They've compared it kind of to like the Tampa Bay Super Bowl. I mean, it's hard to think because we've all spoke so highly of Mahomes, but it's possible. Is it possible that he picked what he did because he thought that would bother Mahomes the most, or am I just making that up?
No, I mean, listen, Mahomes is really good against pressure, right? He's able to see things really well. He's able to identify pressures really well and get things adjusted and routes adjusted. I mean, he's obviously one of the, you know, top pros in the NFL and quarterbacks. He's able to see things really well and make adjustments and get the ball out on time. And he's got a tight end that's able to sit down in space. And when you bring pressure, you play zone and you're able to make those adjustments quick. And when you don't bring pressure, you're able to really keep guys in coverage. And Fangio does not want to get beat over the top. His defense will not get beat over the top. Like that is what they live and die by, is like they will give up things underneath, but they will not get beat over the top. And when you're able to rush the passer the way that they did, Mahomes automatically, like he's scrambling around, his eyes drop. And when your eyes drop and you're starting to look shorter, the defense can scoot up a little bit and those guys can start to jump the shorter routes because they know he can't throw it downfield at that point. And that's what happened. And then you saw the pick six, you saw a lot of these easy tackles and pass breakups. They It was a great game plan, and they had his number from start to finish.
And I would say, given the level of excellence that Mahomes is viewed as, like I said, he played horribly. Now I know that was defense, but I don't know how. And I'm the same with Andy. I can't comprehend how that would make him play the way he did. Yes, the offensive, but when you have a star quarterback, you expect him to be able to negate whatever negativity there is, throw short. And maybe he doesn't deserve as much blame as I'm giving him, but I'm giving him that blame because he's so good. You could have had any quarterback back there. I mean, you pick any quarterback in the NFL, and they could have done as well as Mahomes did in the first, half, or I don't know, the early part of the third quarter. Now, again, as I always like to say to you, if I'm wrong, tell me. Were you surprised at how poorly he played, even seeing the defensive pressure from the front four?
Yeah, it's tough to really blame Mahomes solely because yes, he did make some questionable throws, and there were times.
Solely, I have him at the top of the list. Clearly, it can't be solely. The defensive line just destroyed them, but
Yeah.
I have him at the top of the list. Do you?
Um,
Your alignment.
I I I got to put it a lot on the offensive line because they couldn't even run block either. They couldn't even establish a run game either, right? So like you couldn't even help Mahomes out by getting positive yards on the ground. So if you can't pass block, I mean, heck, at least establish something on the ground so that you can help him out just a little bit. And they weren't able to do that at all. And that's been something that the Chiefs have relied on heavily this year with Pacheco and Hunt. They've been able to run the ball fairly well all season, right? And that's been something that, I mean, you and I have talked about, like they've been, throughout this year, and especially once the playoffs have gone and Green Bay was eliminated, how the Chiefs, like they just find a way. They run the ball well. They don't do anything great offensively, but they run it and they score when they need to. And when they can't run the ball, right, and they can't do that effectively, we kind of see what happens, right? And when you don't have offensive linemen that are effective at pass blocking the way that you need, with an Andy Reid offense and with Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback, uh, this is the result. Like this is the thing. Like, and that's why the importance of offensive linemen in this league. You look at Philly's offensive line; they're really good. They're really good. They're, I mean, they're upper echelon, probably the best line in the league. They're studs. They pass block, they run block, they do everything really well, and that's why they're the highest paid group in the league because they do everything well. You wouldn't trade that group for anything. You look on the other side of the sideline, a lot of questions there. A lot of questions. And it's going to cost a lot of money to fix it. Kansas City did throw money at it to fix it. They paid the right tackle a bunch of money. They paid Thuney, who's a great player, to play guard. Well, they have him out at tackle. That doesn't work that way. The center gets paid a lot of money. He's a great center. The right guard's a great player, plays right guard. But guess what? Like tackles block ends, and that's where a lot of this pressure came from, was from the defensive ends. And that's the moral of the story here.
Wow. I aside from wanting the Packers to win the Super Bowl, if they don't get there, I want to see these two teams play again next year in the Super Bowl because I want to see what happens with a year to look at it and what, because again, I don't have to say this every time. If I'm wrong, let me know. But if I'm Kansas City, I know I got to figure out what I need to beat Philly because they could easily be back there again. There's no reason to think Philly's going to drop off, right? I mean, given the age and everything, the GM, it's easy to assume that Philly could be back. And if I'm Kansas City, but again, I'd like to see it again. I can't believe they can do it and beat them that badly again. But maybe if they're that much better.
Yeah, I mean, listen, and the thing was like all the signs were kind of there that Kansas City, this could happen to Kansas City, right? Like, and the season was showing it, right? And they kept escaping, and things were pointing that direction that this could happen to them, and they kept getting away with it, and they kept winning tight games, and they got into the playoffs, and kind of, I understand their first round game, they played really well, but then they got into the Buffalo game, and there were some things that happened in the Buffalo game that that's open for debate and how that ended and things that. But they're they were in some tight games. And you look over at the way Philadelphia played, the best game that they got was from Green Bay. Green Bay gave them the best game in the playoffs. Besides that, they rolled through everybody. And you're looking at the way Philly was playing, and it's like, well, this team's rolling everybody, and Kansas City's kind of struggling to get through an AFC that really is the AFC that strong? We're not totally sure. So to look at how the Super Bowl went, I mean, everyone wanted to believe that Kansas City could do it or they would three-peat, but I mean, that's maybe people thinking with their hearts and not with their heads. I don't really know. I mean, I didn't want to bet against Kansas City.
Wait a minute, sir. Wait a minute. They were going after their third straight Super Bowl. I'm sorry, all that can be accurate. They're going after their third straight Super Bowl with a great coach, with the quarterback.
Yeah,
That's why, to me, this win is so impressive. You have to recognize how good Kansas City was. They were attempting to set history
I
and they
know.
get beaten like a drum. I'd
I
like to
know how.
go back and see other teams trying to set history if anyone has ever been beaten that badly.
No,
But
listen,
you have
I'm not.
you
I'm not.
have to
Yeah, I'm not taking anything away from how they got there, like how they, their record, how they got there, how they played. Like that's all great, but like what I'm trying to say is like the signs that this could happen was it was there. Like they hadn't played like a dominant style of football all season. Like is what I'm saying. Like they didn't play a game where you're like, man, they just absolutely steamrolled them. Like there wasn't that sign there, right? Like they struggled offensively. The defense, if the
point
defense didn't,
differential. Talking about point differential. Yeah,
yeah,
it matters. Great
yeah,
teams, but you're still, they'd always found a way.
yeah. But when you go,
I again, I defer. If anybody out there said Philly's going to beat them like they're like they're a, like they're the Tennessee Titans, then let me know. I can't find anybody. I just don't think
no.
anybody saw it. But go ahead.
Well, no. I mean, what was the spread? A point and a half or a point? No one
Yes.
saw that.
Yeah.
I mean, no one
Right.
saw it. I mean, the game was over at halftime. I mean, honestly,
Bring up the Giants game when you were so good in 11. But imagine if the Giants had beat you like this. The world would have been shocked.
oh yeah.
And
I mean,
certainly Kansas City, as you've alluded to, have shown the weakness, but it's still a weakness. Yes, but I mean, I have to say, uh, Philly just, like I said, they must just be this good, or, I mean, I don't they have to be the favorite to win the Super Bowl next year at some point,
I mean,
or do you
I
just
think.
think this
I
was a
mean,
fluke?
no, I think they're. they're the betting favorite going into it. I mean, you look the way they finished, right? They finished this season about as strong as anybody could. Um, their last four games, I mean, they're playing fantastic, and I get carrying the way you played at the end in the next season. But like they're the weapons that they have, the players that they have, how aggressive their GM is, their owner, the way he spends money. I mean, he wants to go get guys, he wants to win. He's not afraid to take risks with trades and things like that. So they're very aggressive with the way they do business in Philly. And they know they're not going to win it every single year, but they sure take risks to try to get there every single year, and this is kind of the payoff for it. So, um, to me, you look at the roster, and obviously you don't know the turnover, you don't know who's lead, I don't know their contract situation with what they got going on.
They're
But if
young too.
they're they're bringing most everyone back, I would imagine.
No, I mean they're a young team. They got a young. I mean they brought in two young cornerbacks that were rookies. They're young. I mean I guess not as young as the Packers, but they got a lot of young players.
Yeah. So like I would imagine if they bring back majority of that roster, they got to be. I mean, the favorites, right? I mean, you bring back the running back, you bring back majority of the offensive line, the quarterback, the two wideouts, the tight end, most of that defense. I would imagine they're going to re-sign Bond, that middle linebacker that was on a 1-year deal. Um, looks like you got the same defense.
Here, nobody's going to question their head coach and quarterback anymore.
No,
Like whenever anything bad goes, no problem. When they need to, they can get it done. I mean, that's the biggest difference to me is how people view the Eagles now, right? You got to view Jalen Hurts. I don't care if he doesn't throw a pass for 8 weeks, whatever. When it needs to get done, he'll do whatever is necessary to win. And the same way with the head coach, he's going to have to bring in a new offensive coordinator. So what? He's done
yeah,
that like every year. They're
I know. Like, and that's the thing. Like with him, with Sirianni, like I mean, what everyone wanted him fired. What last year going into this year, everyone wanted him gone. And now look at it, right? Like he's probably going to get a huge extension.
so horrible last year, so disappointing last year, and now they give it up. I want to get to the Packers because I want to make this statement as the tease. Don't the Eagles play exactly the way the Packers kind of wanted to play, but just did it better? From running the ball, what do you expect your quarterback to the defense? So that's going to be next. Do want to mention American Place Casino. Yes, a half hour south of Franklin, or as I like to say, if you're specific, exactly 38 minutes. American Place Casino, just a half hour south of Franklin, 38 minutes, located in Lake County, Illinois. That's fine. They get slot machine, sportsbook. They get everything. And American Place Casino's 2-year anniversary party on Saturday, the 15th. $50,000 cash and free play giveaway. They're giving away so much money. I can't even take all the time to tell you. So you just go to AmericanPlaceCasino.com and find out all the cash you can get on Saturday, February the 15th, American Place Casino's 2-year anniversary party. And yes, half hour south of Franklin, 38 minutes if you want to be exact. Second quarter coming up. This is the Brian Bulaga. I don't know if you can say Super Bowl now. I don't know. After the Super Bowl, can you use? Anyway, see Brian Bulaga Homer Hour, and before we did the break, I said I'm watching Philly. They got the big running back like the Packers do. They got a quarterback who's good but not do this, and they got a defense that's kind of the way the Packers want to play. Are they not exactly what you thought or hoped the Packers could be this year? And I don't know if that means the Packers are going to do it next year, but don't they just have everything the Packers have almost exactly except better?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the way Green Bay's built and the way they're set up and personnel wise, I mean, they're built. I mean, obviously differences, right? I mean, you Green Bay is built a little bit differently with how they, you know, attack certain things. Philly is very, you know, built very inside out. I mean, they are very front dominant. How Roseman, the GM at Philly, builds his team, he builds it from the inside out. Fronts dominant.
I want to let you know about Goody. How many defensive linemen has he gone after? My premise is Goody has tried to do it exactly the same way. There's one difference. Players aren't as good. How many first round picks? We hear it every day. All the Packers in the front, the defensive line. Go
Well,
ahead, sorry.
I'm just saying, but but then you look at what he's done on the offensive line, and Green Bay doesn't normally spend a ton of capital on offensive linemen. I get we just had Jordan Morgan last year, right? And we're going to see how that works out. But normally Green Bay doesn't spend a ton of capital on offensive linemen. Well, Philly does, and then they pay them a bunch of money. And Green Bay, they're not really into paying a bunch of linemen a bunch of money, and Philly does. So
The center would be a great example, wouldn't it? The Packers center,
yes.
Mike. Wouldn't he be? They're paying him in Philly, right?
Yeah, the center gets paid in Philly. The center gets paid in Philly. The left tackle gets paid in Philly. The right tackle gets paid in Philly. The left guard gets paid in Philly. Mekhi Becton, who was brought in, we're going to see what happens with him. He's the right guard. He played great this year. He played great after being a bust in the Jets. They bring him in. He plays fantastic. So, like, what do you do with that guy? Like, you know what I mean? So, like, and we're going to see how the Eagles negotiate that. But you look at the way the Eagles, like, for example, last night, they want to run the ball with Saquon. The Chiefs did a really good job taking that away. So what do the Eagles do? They go to the air and they threw the ball well enough to move that thing up and down the field and stay effective. But then again, hand the ball off to Saquon, get 4 or 5 and keep the chains moving and all that. And that's what Green Bay, that's what they want to be. When they take away Jacobs, Love can throw the ball, get it downfield, push it downfield, keep defenses honest, and then defensively flip it on the other side, rush the heck out of the passer, get off the field, create turnovers, create sacks, and put on defensive displays like that. And that's where you're 100% accurate. That's where they are built to do the same exact thing. It's just the way Philly executed, this season, the way Green Bay did. Green Bay's defense came on super late, where Philly, they started doing it earlier in the season, and Fangio's defense really took on earlier. And Green Bay, unfortunately, offensively, started to struggle late offensively, and Philly started to pick it up. And that's the moral of the story with the two teams.
I mean, I mentioned again, this is another thing of what happened. I don't remember one person, and if they're out there, the Institute will let me know, who said, you know what? Barkley's not going to run worth anything, and they're still going to crush him because nobody thought that their quarterback could do well enough. Like, right? Aren't you thinking Kansas City's doing exactly what everybody said? They shut down Barkley. Now they were able to throw the ball to him a little bit. There is no way Jalen Hurts is going to be able to beat him. He not only beat him, he annihilated him.
Yeah. I mean, how many people probably lost money last night betting the anytime touchdown on Saquon Barkley? Or Saquon. Like, probably everybody, and his yardage number. Like, probably everybody. Because, like, the guy doesn't score a touchdown, doesn't hit his rushing yards. Like, no one saw that coming. Like, absolutely nobody. But Jalen Hurts plays fantastic. He's running it. He's throwing it. So, yeah, no one saw that coming. But the guy performed when he needed to. And, like, here's one thing that I'm certainly not putting. I don't look at Jordan Love as performing when he needs to. I look at Jordan Love as a different type of quarterback. I think Jordan Love needs to be, obviously, I think he can perform all the time. This isn't a guy that I think only can perform when we need him to. I think Jordan Love's a different type of quarterback.
He could have done everything Jalen Hurts did yesterday, right? He could have, and you're not asking anything special from Jordan Love, right?
No, I think he could do all of that. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. Absolutely. All the throws, I think he could run it. That's the thing. Like, I think Jordan Love's not like the runner like Jalen Hurts is, but he can run the football when you need to, right? He can get out of trouble. Certainly can make the throws, right? Like, he can do all those things. So, like, the thing I don't want people to get into this trap of is that
I know what Josh Jacobs would say on the discussion. He'd go, Homer, shut up. What Jordan Love needs is 2 wide receivers like they have in Philadelphia.
Yeah, those 2 guys played well. Those 2 receivers, they played good. Yeah, those 2 guys are good wideouts, and they showed up, man. Like, Brown and Smith, those 2 guys are really good. when you have two, and the tight end's really good too. I mean, and that's the thing, like, and no one's saying, and this goes back to our discussion last week about what Jacob said. No one's saying that Green Bay does not have good wide receivers. I think the receivers are good. I think they're very good receivers. They just have to raise their level of play, right? And they have to have a certain standard that they need to do and perform at, and that's got to be something that they strive towards. And again, they need to understand, you know, uh, they're going to be missing probably, their number one guy was what I think he is. He's going to be missing probably till the middle of the season, in that wide receiver room. Like, and unless they bring someone else, who knows what they're going to do, but he's going to be out, you know. So how does that wide receiver room pick up that slack until he comes back mid-season? Um, I don't know, but that's going to be how that pans out. But the tight end room, I love the tight end room. I think the tight end room in Green Bay is fantastic. But you just look at the weapons that Jordan Love has. I think they're good. They just need to raise their level of play, and you can't try to compare the Philly wideouts. Those two guys. AJ Brown's a All-Pro, ginormous receiver. Hard to compare guys to him. He's pretty good.
But my point is that they have everything that the Packers need to play the same way. The Packers can play identical to what Philly's approach is, but they need better players. They need better defensive linemen. They need better wide receivers. But they have that running back. And as you said, it's about money. But there's no way anybody can watch that game and think that the Packers couldn't continue exactly in the direction they're at now and be good. You just have to have better people. Like you said, the wide receivers have to get better. The defensive line has to get better.
Yeah, those guys have to step up their game. And the thing is, those guys obviously watched that game, right? And they saw that standard of what it's going to take to win Super Bowls, right? That's what it looks like to win Super Bowls. Like, that's how you have to perform.
You're going to have to be better than Philly.
Yes, exactly. You're going to have to be better than that. And you're going to have to, like, on the defensive side of the ball, you're going to have to stop and beat that offensive line to beat Philly. Like, that's what you're going to have to do. And that's not an easy task. So as a defensive line, we're going to have to beat these guys. Like, and you know what? When you go back and watch the playoff game, they didn't do that bad of a job. I'm going to say that right now. The defense did a pretty good job against Philly in that playoff game. So, like, let's just call that what it is. So, like, I go back and think about that game more and more now that I've watched how Philly has just kind of walked through this playoff thing, and the Super Bowl. I just continue to go back and think Green Bay's defense and how that defensive line, and I get, we talk about, is the D line that good and how did they play in our defense? I continue to think the defensive line and how they did against Saquon and this offense, they played pretty good compared to everyone else that Philly had seen in this playoff run.
Yeah, they were down 6 points with 15 minutes to go. I want to take a break because then I want to ask you, what's appropriate to a level of confidence that Packer players could have about how close they are to Philly, given how that game went versus what they've seen since. So the third quarter, the Brian Bulaga Homer Hour, coming up next. Brian Bulaga Homer Hour, third quarter. Is it appropriate? Because fans can do it, and there'll be some debate about how good the Packers were this past year. Couldn't beat the best teams. But you're on the Packer team. How are you feeling about your team going into next year based on how well you played Philly versus what they did to other teams in the playoffs? Take it away.
Yeah, I think I would feel confident about it. It's hard to pull results from the prior year going into the next year. Every season is completely different. I think Philly is the perfect example of that. I mean, look how they completely botched last year, and here they are raising the Lombardi this year. So like, it's really hard to pull, past, you know, past results to current years. But you go back and look how you performed. I mean, you always go back and watch last season's tape and how you did in certain situations and against certain players. Um, and you look at that and you see how you did. And I think Green Bay, they're going to go, that's their last game. So they're going to go back and look at that and see how they did against the Super Bowl champs. And I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised that, offensively, there's a lot to be desired. I mean, we all know that game. We watched that game, but defensively, they're going to be happy with what they did and how they did it and the situations that they were put in that game, right? A lot of bad situations the defense was put in, and they held up and forced field goals and short fields and did a great job against Saquon and really limited him, and put the offense in positions to actually tie the game or close the gap in the game. They kept the team in it. So they'll feel good about it. And however the team, you know, strengthens throughout the offseason, whatever Goody does to strengthen, right? Who knows what that'll be, right? And everyone knows that it's hard to do a quick fix in a year, right? How do you strengthen a team in an offseason to go win a Super Bowl? I mean, that's been tried, people have tried to do that.
Because if you believe, based on that game, that the Packers are that close to Philly, you don't really have to do that much. Is it fool's gold to believe the Packers are that close to Philly based on that game? Yes or no?
On which game, the Super Bowl or the game that they played Philly?
The game that they played Philly,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
noticing what Philly did in the other games. Like
we don't
have to do that much. We have to get better, whatever. But we're right there. And I'm asking you, is that fool's goal? Because that is going to be the debate the entire offseason about what's appropriate and an assessment of not what they need to do, but what they have based on those games.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit of fool's gold because, like, I think as that is a sample size of how you played them, you do have to look at what you did against division opponents that were good, right? The Lions and the Vikings, who are in your division, that you do have to compete with twice a year to like, as you've always said, not to be the 7 seed. Because that's kind of, because if you're the 7 seed, you're probably going to see a Philly or you're going to see whoever, right, in the first round that you don't want to see. And going to their place to play them is not fun. It's not easy. It's hard to do. And that makes that first round game tougher. So it is a little bit of a fool's gold to think, oh, well, we gave, we only lost to them by this. We gave, like, there's a lot of improvement that needs to be done to catch a team like that because of what, obviously they raised the trophy and how they performed on the biggest stage and what they were able to do. But it should give you confidence that we're on the proper track. We do have a good core group of guys here. We do need, if we continue to strengthen properly in the draft and in free agency, we can close the gap down. And obviously, if we improve through the offseason and in training camp and guys, come together the way they should, and we get into the season and continue to improve and perform, we could potentially be there when the time comes in the playoffs. But that's a lot of things that need to come to fruition in the right time and moment. If you see Philly at some point in the season or in the playoffs, to have that come full circle.
Now we get to the theory that I've had and debated with you and everyone else. And I've said the general manager is 80% of an NFL team. The Philadelphia Eagles are where they are and have been getting to the Super Bowl because of one man, Howie Roseman, and it's not even close. As much as I think there has to be new respect for the coach, he'd find another coach. How many coaches can win with that team? Now, the credit of the coach is to lose coordinators and find another guy who's good and another guy who's good. I think that's hard, and that is amazing because he's not calling the plays. He's picking the guys. I mean, the biggest difference from last year to this year was he brought in the old man as defensive coordinator.
Yep.
But back to, and yes, I am saying if not Mike McCarthy, and as good as he was, as good as Holmgren was, I think you can find another coach if you have the kind of players that Ron Wolf gave that team and that Ted Thompson gave your team. But I expect you to tell me I'm wrong, because to me, I might even go 85.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
I go too far on it. But everybody should know that Goody is the most important person in the offseason. And it's not that he hasn't done good, but he's got to do better. Go ahead.
yeah. I mean, listen, the GM is an enormous part of the picture. He puts the players in front of the coach, and then the coach has to coach them and get them in the positions to perform. And we can say all we want that the coach has to make these guys perform and make them successful. I get that, and that is a big responsibility for coaches. But you can only you can only do so much with the guys that you're given, right? And that's the reality of this thing. So like you look at, I mean, listen, I think, I mean, you look at what Goody's given these last few years. I mean, especially in this draft with the defensive guys that he gave, a lot of good football players. So like you can't sit here and say like Goody's done, like a lot of good football players were given in this draft. We'll just put it right like that. So you look at
one thing to this theory. They picked Brian Bulaga and Tauscher gets hurt. If they don't make that good a selection that early, who knows what 2010 is, because they got a major potential problem at right tackle because of an injury.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, yeah, that's Ted, but at the same time, with Ted making that pick, which obviously I'm very grateful for, there was a lot of decision making that went into that with Mike McCarthy and Campy, putting me at a position that I had never played. Right, like there's a lot of decision making that goes into that, saying, "Hey, you're going to go play right tackle. You never taken a snap there. You never did it in training camp, but you're going to go do that now." And like, so there's a lot of
down to about 70% GM. I don't know if you'll give a percentage. The coach and the coordinators, yeah. All right, I'll go GM at 70, but I'll be influenced if you want it even lower than that.
No, I mean, listen, I think the GMs obviously they got a lot of responsibility, man, and like. And people, I think, the draft is so big because the bust rate is so high and disappointments are so high, and that's obviously how GMs are graded, and you know, and obviously wins and losses how our GMs are graded, because when coaches normally get fired, GMs get let go, and that's normally how these things work out. But I always looked at it, and I, for me, fortunately, I was with, obviously Ted for so long, and then Goody took over when I was still in Green Bay, and I got to see how Goody ran it as well. Always very fortunate to have those guys, because I always thought they were bringing in high quality guys, high quality football players. Like I never felt when it switched from Ted to Goody that lower quality football players got brought in. I felt the standard continued to stay the same, right? And then Matt came in, and then the profile of player changed because the system changed. So now a different style of player came in. So like it changes based on, coach and style and all that. But I still felt the quality, was still there. And I still can think it continues. Now, I wish for Goody and, for Packer fans and for everyone that loves the Green Bay Packers, that he was 100% on every draft pick, because that, every guy would be an all pro or a pro bowler and everyone would be happy. But that's just not the way this thing works out. It never works out that way. There's guys that Ted drafted that didn't work out. There's guys that Ron Wolf drafted that didn't work out. That's the way this thing goes. And it really is the biggest gamble in professional sports, is the NFL draft in the first round. It really is. So, yeah. I don't completely judge GMs off the first round draft picks that a lot of people do.
Now, I do want to let you know that I'm holding you personally responsible. I believe that it's only because of you that Philadelphia won the game as well as they did, and that my biggest complaint ever for Brian Bulaga is coming up in the fourth quarter. That's next. The the Brian Bulaga homer hour. We have just a couple minutes late. I don't know how to put this in a kind way. Um, well, Iowa had this player last year, and I am correct. You played at the University of Iowa, right?
Yep.
I would have thought that you would have gone to Green Bay and protested with a street sign saying, Packers, you got to take this kid. He is so good. He will be among the elite defensive backs in the NFL as a rookie. Now, there are other people who I follow. Many thought that he was very good. You can speak. Did you do anything? And is it appropriate for me to complain that you didn't spend 24/7, how many days necessary until Goody said, all right, I'll take him in the first round if I have to?
I mean, I unfortunately don't think he would have cared what I said. Even if I did call him and text him and he probably wouldn't even answer the phone if I tried to bug him. But I watched him a bunch at Iowa.
Just so people who know the player we're talking about, because a lot of people thought the Packers would really benefit from him.
Yeah,
right?
Cooper
Did you know
DeJean, yeah.
Yeah.
He was, I watched him a bunch at Iowa. Very talented player. I knew he was going to be a good player based on just seeing him at Iowa and everything that he did for Iowa and just kind of the way he fit and he could do multiple things for that defense and how Philly and Vic Fangio kind of deploys him around that defense. I mean, it's a perfect fit.
Did you call your coach, Kirk Ferentz, and tell him he must call Goody and tell him how great this kid is? Did you do that?
No, I didn't do that either. I mean, I listen,
All right, okay.
They all went to his pro day. I mean, Green Bay was at the pro day and all that. They did all that stuff. They were there.
You don't feel bad at all. It isn't even close to entering your mind.
Hey, Green Bay, but the thing is, Green Bay has had a pretty good track record drafting Iowa guys, and that's the thing. So, like, they are well aware that Iowa guys have a good track record in Green Bay. So they could have. I mean, myself, Mike Daniels, Micah Hyde. It's a good pipeline. So, like, he knows. I mean, that if you go with the Cooper DeJean, it would have been fine. But I was actually when I was in the green room getting ready to draft, say the draft pick, Cooper DeJean was still available. And I was thinking this is going to happen. And then all of a sudden, Philly traded up, jumped Green Bay, drafted DeJean, and that's that.
Yeah. Now, if you hadn't been given that name and he had been available, would you still have said that name?
I might have just said it anyway. I just said it anyway.
All right. Okay, now, all right, I overreacted a little bit, but you got to help me on this too. They have the commercial for girls flag football, and which I think is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
You, of course, are a coach. They have the girl whooping up on a guy. Okay, give me a break. First of all, why do you do it? Second of all, it's so fundamentally inaccurate, and it's not necessary. All right. Yet, why do they do that? And you coach flag football, and I think it's going to be huge. They're going to have it in the Olympics. We talked about Tasha's idea, but it's fantastic, a fantastic sport for young girls. Yes. Why do you have to have one whooping a guy when that ain't gonna happen? How would you like to take on her team with your team? Like your 8-year-olds that play against 20-year-olds because you teach them all these tricks.
Yeah, it's listen, because my daughter plays and she plays against boys as well. Yeah, and my son, even in his team, there's girls on teams that he goes against. So that there is, but in the level that they showed in the high school levels, there's all girls teams, and they will never go against all boys teams, and
they shouldn't,
and they won't. And the thing is, like, listen, I think it's great that girls are getting involved in it because, like, if my daughter wants to do it in high school, that's great. Um, but in high school, she will not be competing against boys in flag football because I don't know if she'll have much of a chance. I'll just know that. And
No,
um,
I played college tennis. I lost to a girl once. I think she was 16 or 17. They're like, "How could that happen?" I go, "She's better than I am." But I mean, it's
I
different than this.
I can assure you, there's
Never
the high schoolers play flag football a field down from us the same nights that we play. Like there's a high school division right down from us, and I see those high schoolers play, and I just sit there and watch them because they're all big and they're all the high school kids that play, their high school season and they play in the winter flag just to keep playing, and I'm just like these kids are huge. I'm like, they're bigger than I remember when like that I see it. And then I see that commercial and I'm just like, man, I'm like, listen, I'm all for girls playing flag football. I think it's fantastic because like you said, it's in the Olympics. But it made me think if my daughter wanted to play in high school, she's not playing with those guys. Like there's no, these
no.
guys are like doing the head top thing and like taunting each other. I'm like, she's not playing with these
All
guys.
right,
Like there's no
all
way.
right. We can move on. But if anybody has questions about flag football, in addition to you being a former NFL player, I think I don't want to bother you, but they should send you an email because I don't think anybody is more into and understanding flag football, youth flag football, and how it fits because you played football. All right, we're about out of time, but I want the final thought you have because everything's important only as it relates to the Green Bay Packers. Any thoughts during the Super Bowl that you had about the Packers based on what you were watching? There may have been none. I don't know that you necessarily think of it like that. Were there any during the game?
Um, not a bunch. I mean, I think I literally looked over at my wife when we were watching the game, and I said, once it was, I think 34-0. I looked at my wife and I literally said, I go, Green Bay gave them the best game the whole playoffs, and that was my one thought about Green Bay during that Super Bowl was Green Bay gave Philly their best run for their money during this whole thing. And that was my one thought. And regardless of what you thought of Green Bay throughout the season and how they played offensively in that playoff game, you said it. They were down by 6 in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's what it was, right? And no team really fought Philly that way throughout the playoffs. So that was my thought about it. That's about as far as it went. Uh,
Okay.
we'll see what Goody does and what the team does as this thing now gets into the offseason and how they progress, because that will be the determining factor of where this team goes next year.
We will talk again on Thursday. Another Brian Bulaga Homer Hour coming up. As I love to say, I'm not always certain what's next, but I know it's not as good as the Brian Bulaga